Welcome to this short presentation on FDA and customs clearance for food and dietary supplements. This guide will help you through the process of importing food and dietary supplement products to the USA with the help of an FSVP agent like ourselves. My name is James Flynn. I'm the CEO and founder of Primority Limited, operating as Global Import Agent. Let's get started. So importing into the US, here are some of the main customs points. When you're importing food, drinks or supplement products, they are subject to FDA regulations. That means that the label must be compliant. There must be an FSVP, Foreign Supplier Verification program in place, which is usually what we'll take care of for you. You may also need to take account of LACF, that is low acid canned foods, and other USDA requirements for importing into the USA. But from the customs perspective, there are two very important pieces of documentation that you must have in place. The first one is the commercial invoice for customs clearance. Quite often the customs broker may take care of that for you, but some customs brokers are not very familiar with FSVP and how to handle FSVP agents. So the purpose of this video is to take us through that. The second point is that all food products which enter the US must be registered with FDA through a prior notice in advance of arrival within the US. Again, that's a subject for another day, but just be aware that some customs brokers will do this on your behalf and others will not. So it really depends on how you're getting your products into the US. The FDA prior notice will typically be looking for details of the manufacturer of the product and to ensure that they are FDA registered, and they will want to know the shipment details. In other words, where the product is coming from, where it's going to, and so on. Following the FDA prior notice and making sure you have a commercial invoice in place, we can then proceed to customs clearance. Customs clearance will take account of the FDA prior notice, so they will check that the FDA prior notice has been done. That can be a reason for detention. They will also check that the importer of record is correct. We'll talk about that in a moment. They will also are responsible for collecting tariffs and duties on the products using the HS code tariff system. And they will also check for FSVP compliance. They've got direct access to FDA industry systems in order to check the FSVP importer, for example, and to check registration and other aspects of compliance. Be aware that at customs, FDA may inspect your product, which includes checking the label and also checking if FSVP is in place or if there are any import alerts about you or your products during that process. So it's really important, if you want to get your products through customs, no matter how they arrive, by land, sea or air, that you have these things in place in order to ensure that you execute customs clearance efficiently and without any delay. Okay, so let's be clear that understanding the customs clearance process is really critical to avoid any issues and unexpected costs due to detention. So what's the background to all of this? The background to the FDA compliance parts of this are around the Food Safety Modernization Act, which requires all foreign suppliers to be compliant with the same rules on food safety that US facilities are required to comply with. That means that the responsibility for food safety lies with the US-based importer. And the US-based importer must have a physical presence. In other words, it must be a human being in the country whom FDA can go and shake their hand and have a conversation with about food safety and compliance. Where you do not have a physical person in the US acting as a US-based importer, then you need to have by law an FSVP importer agent in place, which is the service that we offer. So FSVP is required under FSMA, and it is the responsibility on the US-based importer or FSVP agent where there is no importer or consignee And the US-based importer and FSVP agent is responsible to FDA for making sure that the foreign facility who manufactured the goods, the last manufacturer of the goods, is compliant under US FSMA rules. FDA will inspect the US importer or the agent, and they will also at some point inspect the foreign registered facility. So just be aware of these things. FDA does not inspect the foreign facility supply chain, but they do expect the foreign facility to have appropriate food safety controls on their supply chain and the raw materials and packaging that they are buying. So in summary, FDA regulates and enforces compliance with the US-based importer or the FSVP agent based in the US. So why do you need an agent? The FSVP agent represents the foreign supplier or manufacturer. This is what the actual laws say regarding FSVP. For the purposes of FSVP, Foreign Supplier Verification Program, an FSVP importer is the US owner or consignee of a food offered for import into the United States. If there is no US owner or consignee, then the FSVP importer is the US agency or representative of the foreign owner or consignee, notice foreign owner or consignee, at the time of entry, as confirmed in a signed statement of consent. All of this is detailed in the FDA FSVP final rule. So they've made provision for a US-based agent to take responsibility for food safety where there is no owner or consignee based physically in the United States. So an FSVP agent approves suppliers and food materials for import into the USA and is inspected by FDA to ensure FSVP compliance. So when do you need an FSVP agent? If you're selling online at Amazon or on another online marketplace like Walmart Marketplace, eBay, Thrive Market, Shopify, or direct to consumer, then you must by law have an FSVP agent in place. As mentioned, an FSVP agent must be in place where there is no consignee who's agreed to buy a food product imported into the United States. Amazon does not own your product, neither does Walmart. Shopify do not own your product. In any of these cases, there is no US-based importer. Therefore, you need an FSVP agent. So what does an FSVP agent do? An FSVP agent is legally responsible to FDA for FDA compliance. They act as the FSVP importer. An FSVP agent ensures that foreign food companies are legally compliant for FDA registration, Food Safety Assessment, FSVP, that's the Foreign Supplier Verification Program, FDA Labeling Assessment, prior notice consignment checks, which agents are required to keep records on, and ongoing supplier monitoring to ensure that the foreign supplier or manufacturer continues to be compliant with FDA rules. The FSVP agent also deals with FDA on behalf of the foreign supplier or the US importer for FDA compliance information requests, FDA inspections on FSVP records, and can get involved in relevant issues around FDA detentions or import refusals related to the compliance of the product. So how does an FSVP agent work? The first stage is that you must appoint an FSVP agent via an agreement called a Statement of Consent. This document will outline and detail the responsibilities of the agent and the responsibilities of the foreign supplier for compliance with FDA rules and laws. The FSVP agent then becomes the FSVP importer for approved products. In other words, products approved by the agent. You may not send products which have not been approved by the agent under an FSVP agent agreement. That would be against the law. The foreign product owner, in this case, will become the foreign importer of record. And this is really important to understand, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But you must remember that the foreign product owner, when you have an FSVP agent, is the foreign importer of record. To ensure compliance and to ensure the correct information is provided to customs, you must ensure that the commercial invoice is correct and that the commercial invoice names the FSVP importer and the contact details, and the DUNS number in particular is a critical piece of information. So getting the commercial invoice correct is critical to the FSVP agent process, and that's the purpose of this video. So what must be on the commercial invoice? Well, firstly, there must be invoice information. In other words, there needs to be a date, invoice number, and a purchase order number if applicable. There must be exporter information, which includes all of the exporter or seller's contact details and manufacturer if different. FDA registration numbers may also be required on the commercial invoice, but these would normally be entered during the FDA prior notice process. There must be importer information, all contact details of the importer or buyer and or consignee, or the FSVP agent details. Remember that if you're using an FSVP agent because you do not have a physical importer based in the US, then usually the foreign supplier or manufacturer will be the foreign importer of record because you still own the goods when they enter the US. There will need to be product information, including a description of the goods, the quantity, unit price, total value, and the country of origin of those goods. There must be customs information. Against each product line, there will need to be an HS customs code, quantity and unit of measurement, the net and gross weight. There must be terms of sale on the commercial invoice, Incoterms for example, any payment terms or other conditions of the transaction, and the currency must be clearly stated as well. Finally, there needs to be a declaration stating that the information provided on the commercial invoice is accurate and complete, and that we are claiming to be in compliance with applicable FDA and USDA food safety laws. When an FSVP agent is required, you must pay special attention to point number 3 above, the importer information. When using an FSVP agent, you must enter the exporter's details as the foreign importer of record. You must provide the DUNS number of your FSVP agent. This is a confidential piece of information which should not be abused. You must keep that confidential. You must also provide the name, address, and contact details of your FSVP agent on the commercial invoice to the customs broker. And you must ensure the commercial invoice is complete and correct to avoid any problems. Getting this correct is critical to the customs clearance process when using an FSVP agent. So let's look at an example FSVP commercial invoice. This example is for illustration purposes only. However, at the top you can see we have the exporter details, including the name, address, telephone number, email address, and contact name. You may also place your branding here. On the top right we have the invoice number, the date, and if applicable the bill of lading number. Where you are selling to a customer, you may have a customer PO number here, purchase order number, a buyer reference number, and any additional reference numbers you want to include on the commercial invoice. Scrolling down, we'll see we have the importer of record details here, and this is where you would enter the foreign importer of record when you're using an FSVP agent. In other words, your details. Where you have a consignee, this will usually be the buyer of the product. But if your goods are going to Amazon FBA or another online marketplace or even direct to consumer, then this should be marked as no consignee. Alternatively, you can enter the full details of the consignee if there is one. If you have a buyer who is not the consignee, but you do have a consignee, then you can enter their details here. Alternatively, when going to Amazon FBA or another online marketplace or direct to consumer, enter no buyer. Note that when sending goods to Amazon FBA or to an online marketplace or direct to consumer, there will be no consignee. This is when an FSVP agent or FSVP importer is required, and the details of the FSVP agent must be provided, including their DUNS number. This information will be used by the customs broker to check on the FDA industry systems that they are a registered FSVP importer. So the next section below will provide details of the FSVP agent or FSVP importer. These terms can be used interchangeably. So we'll have the name and address of the FSVP importer, the DUNS number of the FSVP importer, and the contact details of the FSVP importer. Further down here we can see details of the actual shipment, how it's being dispatched, who is handling the dispatch. Usually there will be a voyage and flight number on here, the port of loading, date of departure, port of entry, country of port of entry, and typically we'll have a date of arrival on here as well. If there are any insurance policies, the reference numbers to those may be included here, and the country of origin of the goods and country of final destination are also marked here. Underneath this table we have the details of the products being imported. Product code, description, the HS code, the unit quantity, the type of unit, so in this case it's in individual packs, the price per unit, and the total value of each line item. And you would add more rows as needed here, and then calculate the total value of the goods and the total invoice value. This is the value which customers will use in conjunction with the HS codes to calculate the duties due, if any. The next part of the commercial invoice covers the weight and dimensions of the packages in the shipment. This is fairly self-explanatory here. And then we have an additional information box, which when you're using an FSVP agent, it is always useful to make a note to the customs clearance agent. In this case, we're saying the shipment is covered under an FSVP agent. Their details are provided on page 1. Please use the FSVP agent DUNS number to look up FDA industry systems to clear customs for FDA compliance. Where there are payments involved, you may enter in details of the beneficiary, and here those details may be redacted in terms of the account numbers and SWIFT codes, but you need to enter in the bank name and beneficiary name. On the right hand side of this box we've got the place of issue, so where was this commercial invoice issued, what's the name of the company who issued it, and the authorized signatory name. And here we have a declaration which is stating, we hereby declare that the goods described in this commercial invoice are food products intended for import into the United States. The goods comply with all applicable US laws and regulations, including but not limited to the Food and Drug Administration requirements and the US Department of Agriculture regulations. And then this would typically be signed and dated, created as a PDF, and sent to your customs broker with the shipment that's being imported into the US. So to summarise, you must have an FSVP agent when there is no consignee purchase, for example, when you're selling online. The FSVP agent is responsible for your compliance with FDA rules, so you must follow their instructions. On the commercial invoice, you will be listed as the foreign importer of record. Also on the commercial invoice, you must clearly state the FSVP agent DUNS number. The FSVP agent does not act as importer of record. We are the FSVP importer only for FDA compliance purposes. Understanding the above helps avoid FDA detentions and customs detentions for FSVP and FDA compliance. So I hope this has been useful for you. Please reach out with any questions or comments. You can ask questions underneath this video and we will respond to those as well. And if you would like a copy of the commercial invoice template to use as a basis for your commercial invoice, please email us and we will get that over to you. Thank you very much.